Here we go. Tuesday, August 28th, 2 days closer to football. Sportsbit betting insight today. Pauly and Teddy, SBR picks. I'm at Real Sportsbit on Twitter. He's at Teddy_covers. Rob Veno coming up to preview the Big 12. We look to stay red hot with the play of the day, all the betting news you need to know in less than 20 minutes. $100,000 bet and $130,000 parlay already in football here in Vegas. We'll get to that coming up, and some good tidbits from Mike Pereira and Peter King in a second. Some bad bets. Yankees took money yesterday, $2 up to $2.50 at stations, $2.40 at William Hill, and win. The total from 8 up to 9. They lost 6-2. Believe it or not, the White Sox have won 10 of 12 on the road. They beat the Yankees.
Yeah, this is one of the things that you're going to see as we head down the stretch of this season, is that some of the dead teams are going to show life in late August and September. You can make money with them. And some of the elite teams, the Yankees, are going to continue to be money losers, as they have been since the All-Star break. Yankees took a ton of money last night. Wrong side loser. Of course, the over wasn't good either.
And the Diamondbacks were $1.75 on the road, shut out by the Giants and Stratton, who threw over 110 pitches. But they still stay a game up over the Rockies, who lost at Anaheim. And if the Rockies miss the playoffs or don't win the division, remember this: they're 25-25 against teams with a winning record, but have one of the best records against teams with a winning record. But 25-25 against teams with a losing record, and a good record against teams with a winning record. I'm not going to go bad beat, because they trailed by 2 in the 8th, and the Angels walked the bases loaded. But that bullpen again, Teddy, they come in and couldn't protect a 2-run lead in the bottom of the 8th, which has been the problem the whole season.
Yeah, and the 5 runs that the Angels scored in the bottom of the 8th inning. This was the big rally. 5 walks, none of them intentional, 2 relatively cheap singles, and a 2-run error on what should have been the 3rd out. I mean, it wasn't like LA went nuts and battered the ball all over the place. The Rockies just basically couldn't get anybody out. Cheap singles, walks, and errors, hence the big rally for the Angels. Tough beat if you had Colorado minus the juice last night.
Play of the day winner again. Astros on the run line, plus $1.10. They went 175 up to $2, trailed 4-0, 11 unanswered. It was 5-4 in the 8th. They put up a 6 spot and beat the A's 11-4.
Yeah, and the first score I saw, of course, I turned it on when it was 4-0 Oakland. I'm like, oh, geez, But the Astros answered back relatively quickly. Houston's offense is on fire right now. We know what that lineup's capable of doing. Astros run line comes through for us as a play of the day winner, and the books took a beating on that one with nothing but sharp Houston money. That guy, as you mentioned, bet up to minus $2 even against the red hot Oakland A's.
How about top and bottom ROI for pitchers in MLB? Fires is number 1, courtesy of OddsShark with these numbers. Mike Leake, Lester, Freeland. Look at those names. At the bottom, Homer Bailey again, lost again Sunday. The Reds are 1-17 when he starts, down almost 16 units. Verlander, Cobb, Maeda, and Clevenger round out the bottom 5 in ROI for pitchers in Major League Baseball. $130,000 parlay at William Hill the other day. The guy laid 34.5 with Wisconsin and 38 with Ohio State, Teddy.
Well, so the whole concept is, oh my God, this guy's a giant square. He's laying 34.5 and 38. None. Wise guys will lay big prices. Sharp bettors will lay 34.5 and will lay 38, given the situation. That being said, how you know is this guy a square? Easy. He's betting $130,000 on a parlay, and that's not something you're going to see sharp bettors do. Sure, the South Point, happy to take the action, even though it gives them liability. The bottom line is, when you're not shopping for line value and when you're willing, sometimes take the worst of the number, those are not regular wise guy attributes.
Also in town to South Point, $100,000 bet on the Falcons plus the points to start at Philly. I can't imagine Wentz plays now. Why, even if he's cleared, they'd throw him in there to start if he hasn't been in action in a year, and Foles hasn't scored any points in 10 preseason possessions as well. Good job by Peter King on Monday with Football Morning in America column. The first 2 preseason weekends, 51 helmet calls in 33 games. This past weekend, they called 9, so they kind of messed with the rule and tweaked it a little bit. Don't call the incidental stuff. That helped, and I thought Mike Pereira on Fox was terrific on Thursday. The other thing you got to be concerned about, the illegal contact by the DBs, scoring down the last 2 years. And last time the illegal contact was made a focus in 2013, they called 136 penalties. Last year they called 33. Pereira says look for a big uptick and more than 100 penalties called this year because all hell broke loose when they had a point of emphasis in 2013 because the last 2 years the passing yards and the scoring has gone down and the competition committee doesn't like that.
Yeah, and look, it's really clear the point of emphasis. The last time they had a point of emphasis on the illegal contact rules, as you mentioned, 2013, they called 136 penalties. That's 5 yards and a first down. Last year, when there was no particular emphasis on illegal contact, they called 33 illegal contact penalties. There's a huge difference between when they're focusing on it and when they're not. Can you add an extra 100 penalties? Maybe. And then, of course, the helmet hits. We saw a bunch in the first 2 games, not as many the first 2 weeks, not as many this last weekend. But again, we can estimate this may be 100 plus penalties. That's 100 plus first downs and 15 yards every time. So you put those together, you can expect scoring to be up. You can expect overs to be in play. Obviously, we've seen that already in August, and we'll see how quickly the markets adjust to the new rules of what could be a very high-scoring start to the season in the NFL. Week 1, traditionally an under week. Don't know if we're going to see under money come in this year like we do most seasons.
Here we go. Before Rob Veno, Big 12, big game breakdown. Nats on the road against the Phillies. It's Scherzer against Nola. They met last week. Nola won 2-0, shut him out. He's top 5 in innings pitched, in ERA, and in WHIP. Doing a great 2.13 ERA. He's won 12 in a row at home and 15 of his last 16. But he's an underdog at home against Scherzer, Teddy, having said all that.
Yeah, and that which speaks volumes about what the markets, A, continue to see in Max Scherzer, and B, think about the Phillies right now. Look, Philadelphia's 18 games over 500 at home this year, 41-23. But they've been scuffling of late. They're just 6-12 in their last 18 ball games. Not like the Nationals are playing great ball. They're 500 for the season at 66-66. They're 13-13 in August. They're 8 games out of first place right now. But no question, we saw a great pitchers duel between these two last week. The markets certainly expecting more of the same. Nola, as you mentioned, 8 scoreless innings, 9 strikeouts in that 2-0 win last week, just 5 hits and 1 walk allowed. That's 15 times in 26 starts that Nola has allowed 1 earned run or fewer. Gabe Kapler talking about his ace, quote, "It's tough to account for 3 pitches. I think that's part of why Aaron Nola, in my opinion, is the Cy Young this year. Of course, Nola's our guy. I watch him every time out there, and just the dependability, the consistency, the creativity, the numbers speak for themselves. Aaron Nola's been bet on at home all year, but no question, this is relatively tough competition, considering what the type of season that Max Scherzer is having.
And DeGrom goes later tonight for the Mets against the Cubbies. They're 0-5 against them this year. DeGrom's got a 1.71. It'll be an interesting race for the Cy Young. I'll run it down again. Nola second in WHIP, third in innings pitched, tied for 5th in strikeouts. Scherzer leads the league in all 3 of those categories, and see if he can win the Cy Young again with a good race with those 3 guys. All right, Big 12 now. I'm high on West Virginia. A lot of people think Texas can be a dark horse. Oklahoma the favorites. Back to you, Teddy and Robbie Veno.
Sure. And this, of course, we've had Rob Veno already talking SEC, Big 10, Pac-12, ACC. We're going to do the final Power 5 conference today. Rob Veno, it's deep dive time. Welcome to the program. All right, we're struggling with your volume right now. We'll see if we can correct that, or at least I'm struggling with your volume. I didn't hear you right there. I hope they did. But let's start with the Oklahoma Sooners. All right, Lincoln Riley last year. I had my questions about Lincoln Riley and his ability to step right in for Bob Stoops and and pretty much keep Oklahoma at the same level that they've been. Frankly, thought Lincoln Riley did that last year. The Sooners certainly contenders, national title contenders, even in some folks are calling them national title contenders coming into the Big 12 campaign. Veno, what do we think about Lincoln Riley and the Oklahoma Sooners? All right, Rob, we've got audio issues for you right now. So, I'm not sure how I should handle this situation. We are of course, on live, which gives us some issues. Let's get a note. What am I doing here, guys? We got volume for Rob, please. Check. Mr. Veno volume. Well, in the meantime, I'll talk a little Big 12.
I'll do it with you.
Just a second.
I'll answer your question.
All right. Yes, please.
So I thought Riley did an excellent job, but all hell broke loose in the playoff game against Georgia when he went conservative and took the ball out of Mayfield's hands. I'm surprised at the high win total. Now Murray going to be the quarterback. A lot of people actually picking Florida Atlantic to keep that one close on Saturday as well. But I bet Texas to win the Big 12, and I think West Virginia could be a dark horse as well, as you have Greer, a stud quarterback, coming back. The question there, it comes down to defense and how many stops they get. Herman in his second year with Texas. Ellinger wins the job there. Revenge spot against Maryland off the bat if they lost at home against them as well. But listen, they were in that prop at the South Point that they put up. You can have, and it doesn't speak well of the sport. Everyone bitches about the NBA and the Warriors. You can have Oklahoma, Clemson, Ohio State, and who else was on the list? Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, or Washington, and the field. And the field's a big underdog in that you're only talking about 4 or 5 teams that can win the college football playoff. I am surprised that Oklahoma's in that list, though, Teddy, because I think there's going to be some losses here. Hard to overcome the loss of Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, certainly. But the bottom line is Lincoln Riley acquitted himself well in his first season on the job. Of course, Texas is a team we've talked about a fair bit here on Sportsbook over the years. Tom Herman, a coach we've made a lot of money with, but only in one role. Herman, as an underdog, has been money. And that's in any game, in any place, dating back. We're talking about, of course, a guy who was a coordinator at Ohio State, a guy who was a coordinator at Iowa State. You can go all the way back to his tenure as the offensive coordinator at Iowa State to look at one of the more impressive point spread runs as an underdog that we've ever found. So that's just one of those from the Big 12.
Well, they've already taken money. They took some sizable money in that game on a neutral against Oklahoma, and I agree with the move in that one, as Texas took a lot of money in some of these games. They also have a big non-conference game against USC. They should have beat USC last year. Remember, they're going in to win in overtime, and they fumbled at the 2-yard line. So that was a tough loss for them as well. Where are you at with some of the rest of the conference, TCU and West Virginia? I like West Virginia over big time. I think they can win 8 or 9 games. No one talks about this. That's one of the toughest places to play, underrated places to play in Morgantown. And they have a Heisman contender in Greer and a great offense. And they open up against Tennessee. That game week 3 at NC State, they're going to be 100 points scored combined in that game as they're on the road at NC State.
Well, certainly West Virginia has the quarterback. When you talk about Greer, they have the offensive mindset. Holgorsen is certainly, the genius in that regard. But you talk about the strength of that home field. From a point spread perspective, from a straight up perspective, check the numbers. Not quite as good as you might think. Certainly not as the reputation that West Virginia has. But you're talking about someone that is capable, in theory, of knocking off the Sooners. They have the QB play. Offensively, they should be there. I worry about that Mountaineer defense. As for TCU, look, we know Gary Patterson's history. And I think a lot of what we're seeing to the support for TCU this year is, we know this coach. We know what he gets done. This is a guy that we like. I got my questions about the Horned Frogs. They look good. They don't look great. In my mind, they're not title contenders in the Big 12.
Now, they only return 11 starters off the 11-win season last year. The new quarterback, Robinson, takes over the sophomore, Ohio State and Arlington. And rest assured, there'll be more Buckeye fans there, even though TCU's down the road on September 15th, although no Urban Meyer in that one. That's a tough stretch, and it's at Texas after that as well. Back to West Virginia, at Oklahoma State and Oklahoma at home. Look at it, at Texas, TCU at home, at Oklahoma State and Oklahoma at home to close the season. I think you'll see a big step back for the Cowboys. They won 10 games last year, but put Rudolph and Washington in the NFL. The interesting game in Stillwater week 3. Boise comes to town. Some people think Boise can go undefeated, but I'm down on Oklahoma State. They only return 12 starters. But Snyder does it every year. They won 8 games last year. He returns 13 starters. It's not pretty, and he's been terrific as an underdog as well.
Yeah, sure. And now it looks like Rob Veno audio problems are continuing, so I got to talk about the teams that Rob Veno wanted to talk about. And with Kansas State in particular, Rob Veno's suggestion, of course, at Rob Veno Sports on Twitter, his suggestion for Kansas State is to look at the Wildcats over the total week in, week out. An offense that's primed to score points, a defense that's not primed to get a whole lot of stops. Don't necessarily think of Bill Snyder as an overcoach. This might be the year that K-State cashes a whole bunch of over tickets. Good offense, weak defense in a conference like this. Well, that bodes well for overbettors.
And Matt Campbell did a great job at Iowa State. They won 8 games last year. They returned 12 stars. A lot of people are down on Iowa State. The big matchup week 2 at Iowa. Then they have Oklahoma at home. And they go to TCU and Oklahoma State back-to-back as well. They shocked the world as a 31-point dog at Oklahoma last year. You can get thoughts on that if you want. And Texas Tech, Kingsbury was on the hot seat. He survived 6-7 last year. They returned 16 starters, 10 on defense. I don't know if that's a good thing. You look at some of their scores. They couldn't stop a nosebleed the last couple of years. Intriguing game Saturday in Houston against Ole Miss. They get Houston at home, tough out of the gates, and then at Stillwater, and then they take on West Virginia at home as well. So that's an intriguing team. It should be. Can they, another like West Virginia, can they get some stops?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk Iowa State for a minute because Rob Veno wanted to highlight the Cyclones and talk about Iowa State under 6.5 wins, a team that had a remarkable season last year, an impressive season last year where things, well, let's put it this way, a lot of things broke right for Matt Campbell and company in year one. They stole a bunch of games they probably didn't deserve to win. Rob Veno says expect regression from Iowa State. They're a team to look at their season win total under the number. And of course, it's a bet on team. And this is one that I was very interested in hearing what Rob had to say, talking about the Baylor Bears. He says Baylor was so bad last year, so bad against the spread. Second year for Matt Rule. Now maybe Baylor has that bet on potential for 2018 after the markets first overvalued them and then watched Baylor crash in the markets. They might have that bet on look for 2018. Rob Veno says, keep your eye on the Baylor Bears.
I can't believe he took that job and left Temple. One win last year was against Kansas. They do return 17 starters. They were, I think, a 40-point favorite at home against Liberty and got beat 48-45 to start the season. They were feisty in a couple games, lost by 8 to Oklahoma, lost by 2 against West Virginia, lost by 10 to Iowa State. Other than that, it was an ugly debut for Rule with Baylor. All right, money time. Play of the day, staying with the Big 12. Keep it going. Where do you want to go?
Well, this is a Rob Veno pick, and I thought it made a whole lot of sense to me. Iowa State under 6.5 wins. A Cyclone team that won more than their fair share of close games last year is going to have a hard time doing it again in 2018. And a lot of the bottom feeders in this conference, most notably Baylor, they're not going to be nearly as easy to beat this year as they were last year. Look for Iowa State, who stole a good handful last year in the fourth quarter, not to have that level of success. Iowa State under 6.5 wins. That's our play of the day.
All right, excellent. Let's keep it going. We'll start it early tomorrow with the Thursday night games and the Friday night games. ESPN game Thursday, Purdue and Northwestern. That's line's moved. The favorite has changed in that one. Colorado and Colorado State Friday. And revenge angle. Stanford at home to San Diego State on Friday night. San Diego State upset Stanford last year. They're on the farm there, and Stanford's bigger than a 2-touchdown favorite. We'll go over those 3 games tomorrow and recap bad beats, bad bets, and bad for the book. Sportsbet betting insight today. Pauly and Teddy, SBR picks. All the betting news you need to know in less than 20 minutes. I'm at Real Sportsbet on Twitter. He's at Teddy_covers. And no thanks to the crew today. Low Shack in the Bay coming up next.